20 provinces remain ASF-free.
The DA is reaching out to local government units to harmonize measures against the further spread of the virus.
Pinapa-intensify din po ang pakikipagtulungan with PCIC. No? Ito po kasi yung ating Philippine Crop Insurance Corporation kung saan po ang ating mga magbababoy ay pwede pong mag-claim ng insurance. Aside from that is to find other areas na hindi po tinamaan ng ASF and also find a way to improve the supply in those protected areas.
Months ago, the Agriculture Department declared that the African swine fever virus is contained. Now comes news that 54 of 82 provinces in the Philippines are affected by ASF. What happened and what happens next to supply and prices if ASF spread is not controlled soonest? We discuss in this episode of the Chiefs. Welcome to this Monday edition of the Chiefs. Ako po si Robbie Alampay. Kasama po natin ngayon si Ed Dinggao ng One News. We're here together here in Mandaluyong and online. Kasama natin si Ami Pamintuan, Editor-in-Chief po ng Philippine Star. Chiefs, welcome back. Happy Easter.
Happy Easter.
Oo nga, Happy Easter.
Kamusta naman ang Holy Week mo, Ami at Ed?
Very prayerful. Natawa kayo.
Oh.
Pero kawawa naman, 72 people dead from drowning. Bihira. Kailan nangyari ang ganyang karaming That's just during Holy Week.
Pero maliban sa mga trahedyang ganyan, in terms of news, habang nagbabakasyon tayong lahat, meron bang malaking nangyari?
Wala naman. wala namang except yung outside the country, syempre, yung mga military drills ng China.
Live fire drills ng China of Taiwan.
So, yun.
Sa
overseas, marami nangyari.
In the meantime, tayo, Ed, dito, umpisa na rin ang balikatan.
Yeah, I think it begins tomorrow. Formally begins tomorrow. Pero before we do that topic, yung ASF, hindi lang yung ASF ang problema natin, I think, which you mentioned in the introduction. It's also the rice production. With El Nino coming in the second half of the year, they're expecting a cut in production in rice in prices of rice. So,
May isang grupo ng farmers, sabi, nananakot lang daw yung Department of Agriculture. Sabi, bakit daw nagwa-warning ng ganun kaagad-agad, hindi pa naman daw alam yung harvest.
Sa bagay, hindi pa naman nangyayari, but si Esther Perez kasi was speaking in terms of historical trends tuwing dry season daw talaga, yung dry season harvest is usually lower. And we're already seeing that. Plus, yung El Nino is expected to further impose a cut in production pa.
May clarification naman tayo, di dadagdagan nila importation yan.
Ayun lang.
Pero in the meantime, si Ed is in the mood of bringing back a lot of bad news kaagad. Dagdagan na natin. Bukod sa magkakaproblema sa tubig, at tapos ngayon, we'll be talking about ASF also, but also starting tomorrow, may oil price hike bukas. Inaasahan din niya. Malaki-laki yan.
Malaki, more than 2 pesos for this sa gas,
Sige. Pero
diesel.
pero isa-isahin po natin. Sige, wag natin pagsabay-sabayin. Let's everybody, dip our toes slowly back into the cycle of things. We'll talk about one issue at a time, and when we come back, we'll talk about ASF. Right after a short break, the Chiefs will be right back. Cham? Mr. Cham? Mr. Cham? Mr. Cham?
Mr. Cham, can you hear us?
Ayun.
Sabog ang ano niya.
Sabog. Welcome back to Chiefs to discuss the spread of African swine fever. Let's bring in Meat Importers and Traders Association President Emeritus Jesus Cham. Mr. Cham, welcome to the Chiefs.
Evening.
Thanks for having me.
Good evening, sir.
Maraming salamat po. Sir, first of all, pakilinaw lang po. We've been talking about African swine fever for more than 2 years now. Kulang-kulang ng 3 taon, if I'm not mistaken. On the other hand, as we read in the introduction, the Agriculture Department at a certain point a few months back said, contained. Notwithstanding all of these things, contained, spread, and so on, essentially, first thing I want to clarify, are we still talking about the same outbreak of African swine fever from 3 years back, or when we say that there is now a new spread, that this is a new problem?
Well, it's still the same problem.
In other words, po, it never really went away.
No, well, not in my opinion.
Okay, so 2 questions there. How come we never really got rid of it? And then secondly, what's happening right now? I mean, is this necessarily a new spike and a new spread?
Well, African swine fever has been very difficult to eradicate. You know, it took Spain 30 years to eradicate it after a lot of money and investment. China got ASF ahead of us. They're still grappling with it. So it's not that easy to eradicate.
But sir, what does it take to eradicate it? Like what did Spain do? What is China doing?
Well, they had to do massive culling, massive biosecurity, and again, it had a lot of intervention from the EU.
And those options are beyond us?
We don't have the investment capability. There is no vaccine. There's no medical intervention or veterinary intervention that is available to us right now. The only option is biosecurity, quarantine, and the like.
Mr. Cham, I remember you're talking about biosecurity. I remember at the start of the outbreak, natakot-takot yung measures na inimpose, parang napaka-strict nga di ba? Yung apart from calling, yung mga inspections, ang dami-daming inspection points, tapos ang higpit-higpit, kahit sapatos lang ng mga kahit shoes and slippers ng mga drivers of delivery trucks, kailangang i-disinfect. Are these measures still being undertaken? Kasi nagtataka kami kung bakit ganyan widespread ngayon after 3 years yung ASF.
Well, I mean, the measures have to be effective. The problem is in the Philippines, ang biosecurity po natin is, I would say, we are very lax because there's a lot of leakage that goes on. So basically, people don't follow the rules. They make a lot of palusot. So it's very difficult to contain the ASF. Actually, we had suggested that instead of doing the current quarantine method, they should just build firewalls around the pig farms and keep the virus from getting into the farms.
So you suggested that to the Department of Agriculture or the Department of the Interior and Local Government? Kasi we understand it's the local governments who refuse to impose border controls on the movement of hogs and pork products. Tama ba yun?
Well, that's what we try to do. So the local governments try to impose border controls, restrict the movement of hogs, etc., etc. But we saw after 3 years, it hasn't worked. And not only that, it has devastated the hog industry. So it's not working for us. Because, Philippines, we are not a pork exporting country anyway.
Yes.
So we don't really need to be, if you ask me, we don't really need to be that strict with regards to the ASF as far as the local industry is concerned. We should be looking after the livelihood of the hog farmers. But the important thing is for them to look after their own biosecurity. It's like you had your own house, you secure your house, you keep the virus from getting in, keep the pigs inside your farm safe, and then whatever goes on outside actually is pretty irrelevant because we are not exporters and the virus is not harmful to humans anyway.
Yeah, you did mention, in lieu of local quarantines, building firewalls. How would that work? How will that exactly be set up? And what kind of investment does that call for on the level of the local producers?
Well, unfortunately, the backyard farmers would not be in a position to invest or enter into an endeavor. The commercial farms initially would be able to invest and build the firewalls around them, but I think it's a little late now. Although you can always start from scratch, disinfect everything. But again, I'm not the expert here, and the veterinarians and the hog farmers and the big commercial farms they would have access to the expertise and the technology.
Sir, I'm trying to understand what you mean by building firewalls. Essentially, what you're saying, tama ba, is that we treat each major farm as a quarantine zone. Kumbaga, nobody in, nobody out. Is that the way
Correct.
you're looking at things? But how feasible would that be?
Well, I mean, it's working in Europe because you see in Europe, farms are protected, and although ASF is found in the wild or in certain farms, but then if they are able to control it and keep it from coming in, so they are able to protect their farms. Let's take the case of Belgium. They found the ASF in the forest, in the wild boars, but then they started culling and protecting their farms, and the virus was not able to enter into their commercial farms.
Yes, sir. Well, I understand, sir. My question kasi is based on the context of the Philippines na dito nga sa atin, bilibid, labas-pasok yung mga tao.
Yeah, exactly. Kaya nga, we're very relaxed. That's the problem, basically.
Pero how's our capability to detect, to test? Kamusta yung pagte-testing natin for ASF?
To detect, you mean?
Yes, and to test. Hindi ba tinetesting yung mga hogs for, kasi you want to prevent the spread because it's not harmful to humans, but it's lethal to the pigs.
No. Yeah, well, basically, if you want to protect your farm, so your pigs are, when you start with your pigs are ASF-free, and you make sure the ASF virus does not penetrate into the farm.
Yes,
So that
but
means
we
you look
have the
after the
capability-
feedstock, you look after the food that the people carry into the farm, etc., etc. Except, again, as far as public hygiene and sanitation is concerned, we are not also very good at it. So the virus could come in through the pests, through roaches or cockroaches or flies or whatever. So it's not going to be an easy job.
Okay. Sir, when you say that, we're lax, and I think everybody can understand, but could you nonetheless put your finger on it, on where exactly in the chain of government we are particularly lax and where quarantines are particularly needed to be stricter? Are we talking about local governments, BAI, the Department of Agriculture, or across the entire chain?
Well, as I said, my opinion is that the commercial farms have to be strict.
Okay.
It's a private enterprise. I have a private property. Nobody just comes in just like that.
Okay. So you're talking about the private sector itself, the hog raisers themselves.
Correct.
What about government in terms of policy or in terms of support?
Well, the government, on the part of government, they can cluster the backyard farms and try to build some biosecurity around it, but it's also going to be very difficult.
Okay.
Well, what consumers want to know is whether we will have enough pork. Is our supply threatened?
Pardon?
Is our supply threatened? That's what consumers want to know.
Yes, sir.
We have enough
Sir,
pork.
yes, sir. So, sir, kasi ang tanong ng mga tao mas kokonti ba ang baboy sa palengke at mas magmamahal dahil mas konti?
Of course, that's natural.
But we're importing a lot of pork, di ba?
Not nearly as much, supposed to meet the demand.
So you're saying we can expect supply shortage ba or price spikes in pork products?
Well, the government already said that there is going to be a supply shortage. And when there's a supply shortage, then prices naturally will go up. Although the margins are, how would I say, enjoyed by the retailers mainly, not by the importers.
Okay. Mr. Jesus Cham of the Meat Importers and Traders Association. Sir, maraming salamat po.
Welcome. Thank
Thank
you
you, sir.
very much.
But we will continue our conversation on ASF. At this point, let's also bring in Jason Kainglet, Executive Director of the Samahang Industriya ng Agrikultura or SINAG. Welcome back na Chiefs, Mr. Kainglet.
Magandang gabi sa inyong lahat po sa mga
Yeah.
Hi, sir.
nanonood ng program.
Magandang gabi. Jason, let's pick up where we left off with Mr. Cham. Ang tanong nga namin, are we expecting a supply problem, if not a crisis, whether supply or prices in pork, given this outbreak again in ASF?
Yung supply, we're still not sure yung sinasabi nilang data, pero yung price is happening even though we're still contesting yung kanilang data as far as stocks are concerned. Pero I've heard that it nung sinabi ni Jess Cham, we must remember, yung ASF is a global phenomenon. Hindi lang siya sa Pilipinas. So ang laging tanong namin sa kanila, bakit hindi na mo problema ang Vietnam, Thailand, European countries, the US, North America, these are all pork-producing countries. In fact, lumalaki pa nga yung stocks nila despite ASF. So, ano yung meron sila o ano yung ginagawa nila na hindi ginagawa sa Pilipinas?
So ano nga pala yun?
Ano nga ang sagot?
Ang sagot, number one, ang problema ng governments for the past 4 years, we're chasing our own tails. Kasi we've been imposing protocol sa movement ng baboy, biosecurity sa farms. Linggo-linggo or almost twice a month, nagpapatest ng mga hog raisers ng baboy kung may ASF o wala. Itong lahat ito will not make a difference simply because bukas na bukas yung pantalan natin. We have no first border quarantine inspection facilities. We are the only country na walang first border inspection. So, labas-pasok ang ASF because we never test imported pork. Ang higpit-higpit natin sa local producers, movement ng baboy within municipalities, within provinces, within regions, but our ports are very open, untested. Ang lahat ng pumapasok na imported pork, they are never tested for the past 4 years. So talagang hindi matitigil ang ASF if we don't do the basic trade remedy, which is quarantine control.
But what's the reason for that? All the while, akala ko pati sila tinetesting So hindi pala. What's the reason for that?
Like the importers?
Yung walang testing sa imports.
Actually, yung importers are still having their time for the past 4 years. Unprecedented yung pork imports natin. And yet, una, hindi mo ba ang presyo ng pork sa palengke. Number two, binaba pa ang taripa sa pork. Pero they are never tested for ASF. You can ask BAI, you can ask DA. We've actually sued the former DA officials bakit walang testing na nagaganap sa mga pantalan. Nasa batas yan under the Food Safety Law of 2013.
I mean, what's the reason that they've been giving you? I'm sure you've raised this question time and again, if it's been a problem for the past 4 years.
Sabi nila, may problema raw ang Ports Authority, may problema customs, pero pagkausap namin ng customs saka Philippine Ports Authority, wala silang problem if they establish the first border facilities. The budget was given 2019, 2023 na ngayon, so 4 years may budget ang DA to establish these first border facilities, pero up to now, ni tornilyo wala pang naitatayo, ni poste wala pang naitatayo.
O sige, apart from first border inspection, ano pa po yung gusto nyong makita that the government can do to contain this problem?
Ang problema, kaya lalo siyang nag-spread because hog raisers are reluctant to report kung tinamaan sila ng ASF because wala tayong indemnification. Itinigil siya since last year. Other countries, what they're doing, basta positive ka sa ASF, binibigyan ka ng 10,000 pesos per head as indemnification mo kasi para tigil mo yan, i-report mo sa government. Ang ating mga local hog raisers, they are very reluctant to report kasi wala silang kikitain, isusurrender mo yung baboy nila papatayin, ikakal. And they don't get anything. Pero kung may indemnification, at least, pwede sila mag-report para may makuha sila kahit papaano, makabawi sila sa puhunan. In fact, for the past 2 years, private sector ang nagbabayad sa bucket para mag-report lang sila. Kasi ang epekto is sa lahat eh. Pagka hindi mo na-report, tinaman yung farm mo, kakalat yan sa ibang farms. Some LGUs are doing that. Siguro, you've heard Cebu. Kami sa Cebu, believe kami sa kanila eh. Kasi talagang they are challenging the national government protocols. They are not culling yung baboy within the 500-meter radius. Sa kanila, basta healthy, okay. Kung di healthy, yun ang ikakal. They can do that because they are testing each and every baboy. Tapos, pag namatayan ng baboy because of ASF, the LGU and the private sector sa Cebu, sila ang nagko-compensate sa backyard farmers. Sa national scale, walang ganun. Kaya talagang hindi siya matatapos ang problema. It will spread and spread dahil nga very porous eh. Bukas na bukas ang borders natin for imported pork.
Jason, very quickly, yung testing, how complicated is it? How complicated is it? How expensive is that process if you're going to require the testing of each and every head?
Sa local, nagagawa natin. So bakit sa imported hindi? Mas madali nga imported kasi you just test the container eh. 20-foot container yan. I-test mo lang yan. Pag may positive dyan, tapos na. Lahat yan i-ship out. Ibalik sa source. Sa local, siguro 5,000 ang nagagastos ng local producers natin daily para lang sa pagpapates ng baboy nila. Sila ang sumo-shoulder nun. Ang problema natin, yung imported, walang testing.
But when you say testing, kasi I suppose we're talking about frozen meat pag imports eh. You get a
Yes.
sample of the meat and then it's tested in the laboratory, or is it like parang
Yes.
Parang COVID-19 testing na live sample that you react with, look for a reaction with the reagent?
Yung frozen, in a day's time, makukuha na yung results eh. So, a day or two, wala namang difference sa imported meat eh. Kasi hindi naman natin problema ang stocks. If the processors will say na madedelay yung kanilang stocks, that is not true. If you look at the data ng NMIS, punong-puno ang mga cold storages. 70 million and up weekly. Week in, week out, may 70 million kilos of imported pork ang nasa mga cold storages. So, kung sasabihin nila ngayon na it will delay yung kanilang stocks, hindi rin totoo yun. Punong-puno ang mga cold storages.
So in the end, are you looking at a problem of negligence or a problem of preference?
Nung una nga sabi namin baka talagang incompetence lang, pero hindi eh. From incompetence, naging negligence ngayon, talagang may favored sector sila na tinitingnan. Hindi ang local producers, definitely.
Mr. Kainglet, pahabol ko lang, would you know kung ano na yung latest dun sa vaccine for ASF? Hindi ba we're trying to develop our own? In coordination with outside of course.
Tayo meron, other countries meron. I mean, it's like COVID eh, kaya nga madaling maintindihan ng tao eh. Everyone are, they're doing their share to develop yung vaccine. Unfortunately, may mga successful pero hindi mo siya pwedeng gamitin kaagad kasi kailangan pa niya ng peer review and dapat meron siyang quantity na i-test mo yung baboy. Unfortunately, wala pa ngayon pero maraming positive sa mga trial, sa mga field trials. Hopefully within the year may vaccine na. Hopefully, pero sa ngayon, unfortunately, wala pang ginagamit in commercial scale.
Sir, pahabol lang ako, ibang topic ng konti. Ang sabi kasi ni Rex Esteperes sa Philippine Star article, we might be looking at a bigger problem with rice or palay production with the coming El Nino, and that might drive up prices further. What do you foresee? Ano nakikita ng Sinag as far as supply and prices are concerned by the second half of the year?
Okay. Very similar sa baboy. Yung El Nino, hindi lang naman sa Pilipinas ang nangyayari yan eh. It will happen in Thailand, it will happen in Vietnam. Yung Mekong River, na source nila ng tubig, talagang may problema na sila sa source of water. Kaya lang, yung agenda, impact, same sa ASF, bakit mas matagal sa atin at mas mabigat yung impact sa local producers. Ang Vietnam and Thailand and India and all other rice-producing countries, nakahanda sila. Kasi they support their farmers eh. Kaya nga, ang sinasabi natin, yung ASF and El Nino, hindi naman siya sa Pilipinas lang nangyayari. It's a global phenomenon. Bakit yung ibang bansa, they can prepare without, actually, na kami sa pronouncement ng DA, parang sila pa yung nagsoso ng fear sa tao. Ibig sabihin, are they telling us, magmamahal ng bigas, magmamahal ng baboy? Instead of assuring the public na may supply tayo, we are doing everything to protect local producers, parang ang DA pa ang nagko-command, okay, taasan natin ang presyo, we will just announce na may shortage tayo, tatanggapin na ng tao yan. Laging ganun for the past several weeks. Napapansin natin, parang DA pa yung nagdadrumbit ng mga price increases, mapasibuyas yan, mapababoy, mapabigas, which is very unfortunate.
Okay. Jason Kainglet, Executive Director po ng SINAG. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, sir.
you.
And we'll start up another conversation after this break. Keep it here on One News.
China's military simulates precision strikes against Taiwan in a second day of drills around the island.
In a video from state-run broadcaster CCTV, Chinese Navy personnel were seen firing guns and unmanned drones from aboard a vessel to simulate a strike against Taiwan.
The Taiwanese government has accused China of deliberately disturbing peace and maintained that Beijing had no right to comment on its diplomacy.
Definitely, there's a storm brewing in our maritime domain, and at this point in time, there's no point on accusing each other of what and what. We have to face this storm as a unified nation.
China continues to stage live fire drills near Taiwan. What does this mean to the region and to the Philippines? Let's ask De La Salle International Studies Professor Renato De Castro. Sir, magandang gabi and welcome back to the Chiefs.
Good evening. Good evening. Thank you very much again
Good evening,
for
sir.
bringing me back to your program.
Well, thank you, sir, for joining us again. Sir, well, of course, the President said that the EDCA sites, the new EDCA sites, are not for any offensive purposes or use. Supposedly, that's to allay fears that we might get dragged into any possible conflict between China and Taiwan. But is that really any assurance to us or to anybody in the Philippines?
No, I don't think the President is assuring us that we will not be dragged. The President is simply telling us that we will take control of our, in terms of our role, that we would support probably defensive operations, but definitely he basically said, no, this will not be used for offensive, and we will have the last say whether these EDCA sites will be used in any conflict or not. So he's basically telling the people, these are not American facilities. They are, of course, infrastructures that are within Philippine military bases. And the use of those bases will be determined at the end of the day by the Philippine government.
Sir, does that mean that we have complete control over their use? Like, for example, even if it's not for offensive purposes, but for logistical purposes for the defense of Taiwan?
Yes, of course. The fact that you have a Filipino-based commander. He will have to determine. And again, he will have to get the go signal from our commander-in-chief, whether we will allow the Americans to do this or that.
Professor, by offensive, ibig lang naman sabihin yan you don't fire the first shot, di ba?
Or you
After
use
that,
those facilities, use those facilities to attack China. Yeah.
So after that, defensive ka na. Pwede na yon, di ba?
Yes, of course.
He didn't rule out defensive And we are
Defensive,
bound under the Mutual Defense Treaty.
Yeah,
Diba?
that's the point. Yeah, that's the point. An alliance is a two-way street.
Yes.
You expect assistance from your ally, then of course your ally would expect assistance from you. We are bound legally by the Mutual Defense Treaty, legally and morally.
Yes. So, hindi naman niya bilanggit yun na hindi tayo gagamit, di ba? For defensive operations.
Yes,
So,
okay.
malinaw yung statement niya, di ba?
Yes, defensive, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, emphasizing the fact that unlike when you have American bases here, I can still remember
Yes.
the issue of
Beijing
unhampered operation. There's no such thing when it comes to those EDCA sites. We will never provide the Americans unhampered operation, unlike when they had Clark and Subic before 1992.
Yes, sir. But sir, that's exactly what I mean din eh. For example, for logistics purposes in the defense of Taiwan,
In the
where
use
does that
of
fall under?
our ally, whatever our ally would use. So, hypothetical situation, let's say you'll have American planes that need refueling, then they'll pass through the EDCA sites. That is, of course, permissible. So, troops coming in, moving into Taiwan, we are obliged.
But weapons in transit from the U.S., for example, to Taiwan.
Then, of course, that's the time that with the Americans will have the permission, seek a permission of the Philippine-based commander.
Okay. In the meantime, how do we position ourselves with respect to how China behaves? I mean, outside of us being attacked or just trying to read the signs. We're here, for example, talking about live fire military drills by China near Taiwan. How are you seeing the behavior of China right now? And for future reference, where will we draw that line?
Well, China is basically telling the United States and Taiwan, you cannot, because the Americans are saying, you have heads of states of Taiwan that has passed through the United States and have visited Central America where Taiwan still maintains those allies. But the Chinese position, the situation have changed. Now, you can do that when China was still weak. But now China is powerful, China is strong, China is assertive, then that's the end of the game. You'll have to China will have to basically dictate the terms. But of course, no way will the Americans accept this.
Yeah, but exactly. In the same context, we can also say that, times have changed. Our taking a defensive position is going to be different. Where we draw the line is going to be different. How we read the signs is going to be different as well.
Yes, of course. That's why the president has made a decision, very tough decision, to strengthen our alliance with the United States, to increase American strategic footprints in the country by increasing the number of joint locations from 5 to, of course, 9. It's already indication we're drawing the red line. We respect, the one China policy. We adhere to this. But when you have a dramatic change of the status quo over Taiwan, this is a matter of national security concern that we need to act as a sovereign and, of course, independent country.
Sir, if you don't mind, sir, I'd like to do a bit of scenario building. In the event of a conflict between Taiwan and China, anong pwede at hindi pwedeng gawin sa mga EDCA sites?
Mahirap eh. It's really difficult to formulate a hypothetical situation because, as Clausewitz said, war is in the realm of uncertainty. We simply don't know how the two countries would react. So it's really very challenging to formulate hypothetical scenario. That's why we have the Mutual Defense Board. That's why right now you have the 2+2 meeting going on in Washington, D.C. for the two countries to come out with a policy direction on how basically we would have to utilize the alliance in general and, of course, the EDCA sites in particular.
Yes,
and
sir.
the number of American troops, what will be deployed on those EDCA sites. This, I think, will be determined in the 2+2 meeting that I think will start tomorrow in Washington, D.C.
But what issues do you think would be the touchy issues with regard to what would be allowed by the Philippines or should be allowed by the Philippines in the event of any conflict in
I think
Taiwan?
one thing is clear. That's mentioned the EDCA. No nuclear weapons.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That's clear. The rest, I simply don't know. I'm really not in a position to determine, number one, what will be the type of scenario that might happen, and of course, how the two countries would have to react. What is clear right now that China is basically telling us is how it would conduct a blockade, which in itself is an act of war against Taiwan with this 3-day military exercise that's supposed to have ended right today.
Well, that's exactly what they did today. No? Nag-practice sila in conducting a blockade of Taiwan. So I want to ask you about drawing a line between offensive and defensive. If the U.S. tries to breach that blockade, would that constitute an offensive operation?
That's defensive. That's defensive
Diba?
because blockade is an act of,
Yes.
aggressive operation on the part of China, starving Taiwan, the population.
Yes, if you're going to resupply Taiwan lang naman, di ba? That is
Yes.
not an offensive operation.
That's not
If
an
you
offensive.
try
Yeah,
to
breaking of the blockade.
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 Okay, and we can assist the U.S. being an ally under the MDT in breaching the blockade. Tama ba?
Maybe on passive. I don't think we will be sending troops. The most way I think we could do, and this is what I can safely say, is provide the real estate from where American forces would train, would of course prepare for any possible operation, and of course from there they would conduct their defensive operations.
Okay.
For example, sir, using the EDCA sites as a staging area for resupply
And reinforcement, yes.
Yes, sir. Not just of civilian supplies like food and medicines, but as well of weapons.
Weapons, troops, yes. Preposition. Certain weapons that will be prepositioned there that will be used by the United States military, just in case you have a push comes to shove situation in the Taiwan Straits.
Yeah, but one basic thing, Professor, diba, is that however Beijing looks at whatever scenario for Taiwan, factor din ang Philippines doon. I mean, it's not as if this is going to be, let's take this scenario and take this action against Taiwan, and then let's see what the Philippines and the U.S. does. I mean, it doesn't work that way anymore, diba? In this new order, in this new attitude of a more aggressive Beijing. Whatever scenario that is, there is no scenario where the Philippines is not factored in by Beijing.
Yeah, knowing the Chinese as being also realists, they would always take the worst case scenario. That the Philippines would actively support the United States. Given the fact that we have this long-standing alliance with the United States, and the Chinese are also very much aware that the armed forces of the Philippines is very suspicious of China, and the Philippine population in general has really very low confidence, trust over China. They're not dumb. They have read the surveys by the social weather stations, by the Pulse Asia, and even by the annual Institute of Southeast Asian Studies survey. The last one that came out in 2023 states that the Filipinos are the most suspicious of China among the other ASEAN countries. So it's very clear. Yeah, they know. They're not. They've read the writings on the wall.
Pero yung governor ng Cagayan hindi siya ganyan, ano? I want to ask you, are you seeing China trying to use economic pressure again in reaction to the way it did before, di ba? Pati yung banana natin, konting tuldok, ayaw na nilang tanggapin. You think they're gonna resort to that? Because that's the concern of the governor of Cagayan. Sabi niya, kaya ayaw niya yung aid ka na yan dyan. yung mga new sites in his province.
Yeah,
Because he
probably
wants
not, yeah.
to develop closer economic trade ties with China. You think
well-
Cagayan will be affected kung yun nga ang objective?
Well, ayun yung fear ng governor.
Yes.
Might as well, ask that governor to secede from the Philippines and make Cagayan a province of China. Because we have a unitary system. When it comes to, the Constitution provides, when it comes to foreign policy and national security, this is determined by Manila, by the central government, not by the provincial government, unless, of course, he wants to secede from the Republic of the Philippines, simply because he is really drawn by Chinese wealth into, to China.
Pero sir, is there...
Beijing is also trying to in hearts and minds, especially, in the Philippines, no? You think malakas siyang economic pressure na yan in case they resort to it again?
Yes, that's why we have to also prepare for that. So we should not allow ourselves to be, economically simply dependent on China. We really have to diversify in terms of our trade relation, investment. We have to ensure that we enjoy, as we would like to be, proactive when it comes to national security. This could only be, of course, strengthened if we have a degree of economic independence from China, which, of course, uses its wealth as a form of, it's this weaponized trade and investment. See what happened to Australia during that time when Australia called for an investigation of the COVID-19 pandemic. And of course, this angered China. So, in several instances, we see China using economic ties as a weapon against that country. We experienced this in 2012.
To that point that we need independence, it brings to mind an ironic position that in the short term, in the immediate term, we still turn to the other side, di ba? Parang, malulugi kami dito. These are the things that we stand to, we turn to you now, our allies. Starting with the United States, you mentioned Australia and the whole alliance behind that. But we turn to them as well. My question was that part of our calculations, is that part of the negotiations, not just on the military side, but also to factor in, the economic risk that we're taking here, and these also have to be mitigated. Is that something that the alliance has also guaranteed us?
Yeah, of course, this is also part of the narrative, no? Since, of course, the Duterte administration, the narrative is that we have been so economically dependent on China, that China is our number one trading partner. Now, if China, of course, would drop the boat, close its market, it would lead to an economic collapse of the Philippines. That is simply a propaganda of the previous administration. Because if you would look at, our economy is not really dependent on trade and investment. It is dependent on the remittances of Filipino OFWs. Right? So our economy could afford to have, trade deficits, balance of payment deficits, but at the end of the day, our balance of payment deficits is surplus primarily because of the money coming from Filipino OFWs all over the world. So that makes the Philippine economy unique in Southeast Asia.
Sir, balayan ko
So,
lang. Yes, sir. Sir, balayan ko lang
yeah,
sinabi niyo kanina, sir,
Yep.
that diplomacy, of course, is the jurisdiction of the national government, and rightly
Yes,
so.
foreign policy,
yes, sir.
jurisdiction, defense. That's
Yes, sir.
supposed to be determined by the central government.
Yes, sir.
And we are a unitary system, not a federal system.
Yes, sir. Tama naman, sir. Pero is there any merit to the concern, and it is a concern of some governors, particularly Governor Mamba, that his area, his region or his province would be dragged into a conflict in the event
entire
of...
country will be dragged into a conflict natin. So probably it's a concern of the national government, especially of the intelligence and law enforcement operation to investigate whether, money is flowing into the pockets of the governor, which is of course a crime. They're not supposed to receive gifts, right? So probably just like what happened in Australia in 2015, there was an investigation by the intelligence agency of members of parliament and Australian politicians who were receiving huge amount of money from the Ministry of State Security of China. So probably this is an issue that we will have to consider.
Yes, sir. Oh, I was wondering why you brought it up. Have you heard or have you had any indication of that happening?
I don't know. Probably it's time that we investigate why some government officials are giving importance to the amount of money that they're getting from China, and especially and of course intervening in matters that are of course sole prerogatives of the national government, specifically of course foreign policy and of course national defense.
Okay. De La Salle International Studies Professor Renato De Castro. Sir,
Thank you very much
salamat
again.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
Always
you very much.
pleasure to have you
Have
on
a
board.
great evening and happy Easter.
po. Happy Easter po.
Bye. Good night.
And that is all we have for the Chiefs. We hope what was discussed will keep the conversation going. I'm Robbie Alampay.
I'm Ate Panito ng Madrid.
I'm Ed Lingao. We are One News, all sides, all the time.